Shannon.
Hello, beautiful.
Oh my goodness.
It's
We
funny.
should do our intro.
We should. We should. I'm so glad that we start an hour early so that we work out all the kinks before we end up on time. I
So,
love that.
so when the tech crashes, oh,
And we're still on time. I love
here we go.
it.
Let's do this.
Okay, ladies, welcome to our podcast. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black female millennial entrepreneur, the founder of ShealoGlo, a handmade shea butter company. I am a champion for your self-care, business care, and intentional wellness.
And I am Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, and published author who helps you upgrade yourself and community care.
Yes, and together we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness. Welcome, welcome to our show.
I don't know about you, Shannon, but I need to take a deep breath and get grounded.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's take a deep breath. Let it out with an intentional breath, like a sigh or another sound. Let's take another deep breath and let it out with a sigh and a shake. Maybe roll our shoulders a second.
Yeah.
Wherever you are listening to this, just take a moment to check in with your body and get present and get grounded with us here. Woo!
Yes.
So right before we went on air, I know the camera was giving you trouble. Yeah. This is what happened. I had our music playing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this loud, it sounded like a foghorn, like,
oh, okay.
Like it felt like a scream of death. Like
wow.
That was the noise that was happening for about 30 seconds to a minute. No music, just shut down. What is happening here?
So all the systems are overheating, okay?
I've never had that happen before. That's so crazy. Wild.
So glad that didn't happen on live.
Right? Well, and if it does, y'all.
Yeah, hey, we gotta roll with the punches, just like Corona, okay?
Right? Between Mercury and retrograde, Corona, solar flares, who knows what is happening here?
It's crazy. It's crazy.
So, how are you today, my friend?
I am great. I am so looking forward to our conversation today, on financial wellness. And earlier I saw your post outside on your 2-mile walk, and enjoying the weather out there. And it definitely reminded me that we were talking today and that I was thankful of the time that I have. I set my schedule. That's one of the ways I practice my self-care and my wellness. And it didn't go as planned, which is usually the case. But because I knew my schedule, I knew where everything is, I was able to flow with the day, and that's definitely what I think about when I think about my finances too. So I'm excited about what we're about to do.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I had to make that post because the sun was shining here in Georgia.
It was beautiful.
And everything's just better when the sun shines.
Look at it.
Right?
The sun.
And then I was on a master class in the afternoon, early afternoon, and they did a metaphorical check-in. So we should do this because it was super fun. Okay. So if you were the weather, what would your check-in be today?
That, I've been trying to figure out which direction to go in and which direction is the most effective for my energy, especially being in Georgia. We know it just fluctuates, right? So I feel like I'm in a good flow today. That's how I feel. It's sunny, it's bright, things are flowing, and it's good. Even though it's cold, we can still manage it.
Right? So yeah. I checked in with a sunny with a few clouds, right?
Yeah.
Personally, I'm feeling really sunny and in a good space, but I know so many people around me are hurting and struggling. So I think that's a piece of it. But
yeah. And I mean, you mentioned Texas on your post earlier, and I know you're from Texas, and I was talking to my boyfriend earlier. He was telling me about the weather and how people have been affected. And it's really interesting because I don't watch the news. I'm not going to lie. You know, when I was younger, I used to feel like a bad adult for not watching the news. But I just can't handle it emotionally. You have to be a good steward of the way that you tell stories. And we know that the news is depressing. Okay. So I'm thankful to get my information from reliable resources now. And I was thinking about you and your family, Christine, and how they're doing out there with this weather.
They're a little cold. So
Yeah.
a lot of my people are still on well water, and because they're on small farms or things
Mm,
like that. So anybody that I know that's on well water currently doesn't have running water
mm,
because pipes are frozen, and
wow.
so they're hauling water or hauling snow.
Mm,
And right, and my parents, I grew up 28 miles south of Dallas. So when I grew up in Dallas, Texas, it was very rural. So we grew up on a small farm. It was 4.5 acres when I was growing up on it, and drafty old farmhouse that my papa had actually. So my dad's dad had actually um, moved a house from Latimer Drive, which is in
mm,
downtown Dallas, when they were putting in a freeway. He took this old duplex and he moved it and rebuilt it as the family house. So it is a big 2-story farmhouse,
hmm,
not built for temperatures under 32 degrees.
mm,
So I think my mom said it was like 7 degrees in Dallas, and she said even with
mm.
heaters on, the house is 42 degrees. So
Wow.
they are bundled up. They're well. Thank you for asking.
Of course.
They luckily they are on the same grid as the fire station, so they have
Mm.
not lost power. And
That's
then
smart though.
family and friends have lost power, and it's cycling, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a mess there. It's a mess.
Yeah.
And so I am I am curious about how this is all, because here's the thing about right now, while they're in a deep freeze, everything is not broken. But when it
Mm.
starts to thaw, then what's going to be broken and what's going to,
Right.
because people who live up north, they don't understand why we freak out with these temperatures, but we just
Mm.
don't have the infrastructure. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not built for that temperature.
Mm.
So I think it's, yeah. And there's financial resources, just like we're talking about today, right?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
the things that go into this.
And I mean, it's so interesting because it kind of feels like middle school and high school all over again. When I'm in math class and I realize that the equation we just talked about is something I can use in science class. And in chemistry, we're working on this stoichiometry, and that was my favorite one, right? And we're balancing all the equations and stuff. I'm a nerd. I love it, right? And that's how wellness is. And it's exactly what you said. You know, different people in different places might think that it's second nature, of course, like you just do this and there has to be an infrastructure that you need, and that reminds me of our definition that we have today for financial wellness. And if I could read it to you,
Oh, please.
um, yes, so this is from the Life of Wellness Institute. And it says that financial wellness involves the process of learning how to successfully manage financial expenses. Money plays a critical role in our lives, and not having enough of it impacts health. Financial stress is repeatedly found to be a common source of stress, anxiety, and fear. Keeping track of expenses, making a budget, and sticking to it are important skills to have in order to be financially responsible and independent. Learning how to maximize your financial wellness now will help you feel prepared to handle potentially stressful financial situations in the future. And this storm is a perfect example. If you don't have a savings and because of the weather, which is completely out of your control, your house is frozen and it thaws out, how nature does things, and what happens when the stove isn't working, what happens when part of the pipe freezes and falls off. You know what I mean? What are we going to do? And so it's important to know what you need beforehand. And I just look forward to delving into this conversation because I could talk about it all day, which is why we started a podcast, right?
Right? Well, especially
Yeah.
around the pandemic and other things that are happening. I love that definition you read. Thank you.
Yeah,
Because,
of
as
course.
we were researching for today, we also ran across the definition of financial wellness at Northwestern, which kind
Yeah.
of made me laugh because it was much more succinct. It said,
Mm,
and not as well defined.
Right.
It was financial wellness is defined as satisfaction with current and future financial situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like, so I like the definition you gave us and about, I mean, we know, like even what you said about money plays a critical role in our lives and not having enough of it impacts health.
Mm-hmm.
We see
And
that with the disparity of health between white women and African American women.
absolutely.
See that in whole populations in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
See that about access to health care.
Right.
What people have been fighting about in our government for, the Affordable Care Act and having
Mm-hmm.
access to health care.
Mm-hmm.
Because health, jobs are tied to our health insurance right now. So
Absolutely.
it all just comes together, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I mean exactly what you said. So let's get into the personal stories, because um that's one of the first things I think about. Doing this podcast, Women Connected in Wisdom, one of our main goals, of course, is to provide resources and actionable steps, right? So I'm very smart. I'm sure a lot of people would guess that by listening to me speak, right? But my good old rich dad, Robert Kiyosaki, okay, taught me that A students work for C students. And if you're a C student, I'm not bashing you. I love everybody equally, okay? But I was like, what are you talking about? I've got to read this book. Why? And it's because we're taught to learn by one set of rules and stick to that. And there's only one right answer. And that's like a straight line. Straight lines don't happen in nature. You have to go with the flow, figure out what the weather is, and do what you need to do based on the situation that you're in. And C students are great at that. They're like, whatever, or they're finding their own way. And the teacher is upset about that. And so they got a C, but really in real life, they would have been the only person to pass. And so that made me start thinking about finances differently. And, we talk about finances in women and glass ceilings and different barriers, even as, of course, an educated young Black woman. I was, able to take the opportunity of having my high school teacher pay for my college application. That wouldn't have happened had, of course, a list of other things happened, but I needed it to happen. And I was thankful for that teacher who was able to invest in me. Then I was able to go to college because they said that your grades will get you scholarships. I listened to that freshman year because I absolutely had to. And my tuition was completely covered for 4 years. And I graduated with honors, right? Went on to working at Papado and being salary, got promoted and all these things. And I found out that I was really smart, really able to follow directions and be part of the team. But to make a budget for myself and stick to it, setting goals and knowing what I personally, as Shannon Mitchell, wanted to do, that wasn't ever part of the conversation. So to find out that I was really smart in these other areas and almost illiterate in finances was almost devastating.
I love that you bring that up, Shannon, because I would put me there too
Yeah.
for different reasons. You know, I think, and I know we're of two different generations, but
Yeah.
I grew up in a family that we didn't talk about money. Like we were actively taught not to talk about money.
Mm.
My grandfather, who I adore, rest his soul,
Yeah.
he he came from sharecroppers and came through the Great Depression and, did not have money growing up at all. Like he had, I think he was a third grade education or fourth
Yeah.
grade education because
Mm.
because of the Great Depression, he had to come home on the farm and work. Right.
Mm.
And so because of white privilege, when
Right.
he was in World War II and he was a wounded veteran, got wounded in the war. And because of his access to the GI Bill, his kids could get an education.
Mm.
He could also buy property. That's how he bought that 4.5 acres, was
Mm.
from his time in the service as a white male. And that's where he started accumulating some money and had access to resources, right? But before then did not. And so
Right.
he never talked about money. did not, he was the ultimate penny pincher.
Mm.
Like, I remember once a year, he would take the family out to dinner. So it was a big deal. Once a year,
Yeah. Yeah.
take everybody out. And then, and he was a very generous man, generous of spirit and stuff like that. But we grew up with that whole concept that we didn't have money that was passed down from his generation. So we had a roof over our head. We had more food
Right.
than we could eat because we grew our own food
Yeah.
we did farm to table before it was cool, right?
I love farming the table.
We grew up with that. We don't have any money. We don't have any money. We don't have any money.
Right.
And
Right.
even though we had money,
Mm.
right, our needs were met. So we grew up not to talk about it. I remember my mom would sit down and balance the checkbook once a month, or maybe
Mm.
she did it once a week. I remember her doing it once a month. And,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't remember any education around.
Right.
And I don't, and we didn't talk about it at home. We didn't talk about, all we talked about was we don't have any money, or
Mm-hmm.
you can have that on your birthday. Like,
Right.
wanted something, you would get it, you would get new clothes on right before school started, and then you would get something special on your birthday and Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so, I mean, didn't lack for anything. It was
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful childhood and growing up in nature and stuff like that. But the whole financial piece, and
Mm-hmm.
actively taught, let me back up on this. Actively taught that people who had money were questionable.
Mm.
You know, that maybe their morals were questionable, or they weren't trustworthy, and I don't know that they did it on purpose, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but so coming from that background, like, really have it, like, still I'm in my 50s, y'all, and I'm figuring this out,
Yeah.
because when you're not taught it and you're actually taught to shy away from it,
Mm-hmm.
it's a big,
Yeah. And
right?
like it's crazy because not only that, but okay, so for the past 2 decades, my dad has been cutting yards, right? He has a lawn care service. So I grew up mowing and weed whacking. We've talked about this, and I would love to go get the money from the customers, right? He would let me go get the money. So I come back and I'm flipping my money, making sure everything's faced the right way. That's cute and all, but you have no scope of how much things cost. A Tesla costs $67,000. I looked that up to put it in my abundance budget. We'll get to that later, right? But you got to know the price of it. But just holding on to the money in your hand, like penny pinching, like you mentioned, or facing it one way, isn't going to tell you to follow your expenses, like this definition just said. Make sure that you know what's going out and what's coming in and what you need based on different situations.
There were 4 questions that I ran across
Mm-hmm.
as I was researching for this episode, and one of them was, there's 4, so I'm gonna go through 4 of them so we can talk about them, right?
Yeah.
About how to have financial wellness.
Okay.
Number 1, do I have a budget, and am I able to save money?
Mm.
I'll just be really transparent, y'all. I
Mm-hmm.
suck at this.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I have a long-term savings. I'm really not great at short-term savings. I'm getting
Mm.
better. But I yeah, I think that whole piece about knowing our numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and I could do some definite improvement on. So number 2, does my behavior reflect my beliefs and values about money?
I like that.
Yeah. When I first sat with this question, I was like, well, yeah, it does. Because,
Mm-hmm.
I buy from ethical companies. I'm intentional about where I put my money.
Right.
I'm generous with my money when I have it. But then here's what hit me, Shannon.
What?
Teach about self and community care. I'm really
Mm-hmm.
good at the community care part. Sometimes I'm not good at paying myself first.
That's literally what I just wrote down. Hashtag pay yourself first.
That's a part of self care, right?
Yes, it is.
About often self care being massages and things like that, which can be tied to the financial, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is also literally paying your bills.
And if I could too, I would say so. What you just said, massages. I'll add in nails, eyebrows, mustache, beard, all those things being taken care of, right? And for me, it was the second one, right? Does your behavior match up with your beliefs versus values? It's very important to take care of yourself. But when I was salaried, making tens of thousands of dollars and I didn't have a savings account is because I didn't set the budget first. And so I'm going to get $100 pedicure and manicure because I like the hot stones. Do I want paraffin? Why are you asking me questions? Is the sky blue? Like, let's go. Of course I want it. Hot towels. I need a 30-minute massage. You know what I mean? Like, yes, I need all of it. $100. And if you have it, if it's budgeted, absolutely, and you know where your money is, of course. But when you don't know the numbers, now we're starting to get into unhealthy habits.
Right. Well, and that flows into question number 3. Am I using my money wisely?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's that piece of intentionality. And everybody
Exactly.
spend their money how they want to spend their money, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't have judgment on that piece.
Right. Of course.
Got if you have dependents or have food and shelter and
Right.
electricity, especially when it's cold,
Whew.
um,
Yeah.
that no judgment on where you put your money, but are we using it wisely, right?
Right. Right. And I love what you said from the class, the mastermind that you went to earlier about um, give your dollars a job. You know, when I was a kitchen manager, you are running multiple systems at the same time in a restaurant. I'm thinking about the host. I'm thinking about the bartenders, the servers in their greet time. Is the ice filled up? Is the trash can closed in the back? Where are my dishwashers at? Where are my cooks? You see what I mean? And they know that when Shannon comes in, she's going to ask to make sure that you're doing your job. And that's exactly how your dollars should be for you too.
Right. That came from the eight best personal finance apps that we're going to talk about in a little bit. That came
Yeah.
from the apps that every dollar should have a job.
Okay. I like that. From Latoya's article.
Yeah, that was an article by Latoya Irby, and it's
Mm.
called the 8 Best Personal Finance Apps. Which let me give you the last fourth question before we
Yeah.
jump back into that. But
Okay.
number 4 is, do I have financial goals and plans
Hmm.
for the future?
Boom. And goals are written down, ladies. They are written down. If they are not written down, you do not have them. And I'm not pointing fingers at you. We're just talking on the podcast, okay?
I'm going to say on that one, I was talking about in this masterclass earlier today,
Yeah.
you got to put your numbers beside it.
Ooh, yes.
Like any goal, right? Like when
Yeah.
we're investing Mondays and somebody says, I'm going to do something, and either you or I pop up and say, when?
When? Yep. What time? I will text you.
What time are you
Yeah.
texting me? But the same thing for our financial goals,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Is I want to reference the class you were talking about. I was in an
Yeah.
Awarepreneurs masterclass done by Paul Zelizer earlier today, and he has the Awarepreneurs podcast. Y'all should go check it out.
It's
Pretty
amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
But he was talking about for entrepreneurs that you should have, he was talking about boundaries. And one of the boundaries was financial boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote it all down so we could talk about it today because it was such good stuff.
Thank
But
you.
he was really talking about as an entrepreneur, but I would say as anybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to have a budget, but you don't want to just have one budget. Like you want to have your minimally viable budget. What's your basic, you're paying for your shelter, your food, your transportation, your clothes, like you are
Right.
covered, right? And you can
Right.
function. That's your minimal viable budget. What's that number? And really
Down to the penny.
being honest about it.
Yeah.
Looking at, I know I've done a couple of courses before where you look back to get your numbers. You look back the last couple and be really honest about what you spend. Don't just, I spend $200 a month on food.
Right.
Well, that may have been before the pandemic, before you may be spending $400 or $500. Like
literally. Yes. Yes.
What are you spending? And then the second budget is, what is a sustainable comfort budget?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not talking Lamborghinis or anything like that. We're talking, we got some good stuff, We can have nice meals or nice vacations, but it's sustainable.
Yeah, like I can tell you for me, the first one, what I think about is again the basic bills. This is your phone, car insurance, car note, rent, Georgia Power, whatever those bills actually, your
Internet,
gas, yeah, the internet, your
yeah,
gas for your car, all those things, basic budget. The second one is okay, now I'm getting my nails done every 2 weeks. I'm getting my hair retwisted every 6 weeks. Eyebrows, beard, mustache, you know what I mean, is being taken care of on a consistent basis. Now that's the next step up.
right? And then
Yeah,
the third budget is the abundance budget.
right. And that's the Tesla, the vacation home.
And what's that for your vision? Because everybody's going to have a
Hmm.
different vision, right?
Yes, that's true.
Some people want a boat. I'm like, I don't want a boat. That's a
Some
lot of
people
money,
want a plane.
right? Right.
Yeah.
Everybody's version of abundance is different,
Mm,
right?
I love
So
that.
what does that look like? So, and getting really specific, because
Hmm.
you use the word abundance. Well, what is that? Like, I
Right.
have a ton of abundance in my life when you look at the clutter like that I have. Financial, maybe different, right?
Right.
Check it in with what is it and what's your number? Like,
Yeah.
what's your goal?
And I love that, and what our listeners don't know that we know is we're very intentional about the name of this podcast, right? Because we don't want to put an extra burden on top of you. Wellness and manifesting, all this stuff is, it feels like work, and we're already doing a lot of work. And yes, it's true. You need to write down your goals. You can't get around writing it down, putting a number beside it and a date, but this is the fun part. What does your perfect day look like? Waking up in silk sheets on the way to your private jet for a vacation. Like, what is that? Like, have a little fun. And remember that you, as a woman who is taking care of yourself and your community, have the right to dream as big as possible. And that's why I'm so excited, Christine, because in the history of women's history, we are in the best position in the United States right now. For 4 years, like right now, we have so much opportunity to really see what our goals should be and to start making steps to be more well.
Yeah. Right? And this whole thing about we've talked about before how all the wellness interconnects and
Of
financial
course.
peace. Because if we can't be well financially, we're dependent on other people, right?
Hmm.
Whether that's a spouse, a partner, um, our parents, like,
Support group, right?
right? Whoever.
Hmm.
And so
The government.
how do we do that, right?
Yeah.
And I loved in this class I was in earlier, it really made me think as a female entrepreneur, right? He said, when you know your numbers, when you know what your goal is, then when people ask things of you, like ask you to do something for free or ask you to volunteer, um, which they do, they ask
Hmm.
all the time, very much more so than men.
Right.
They want us to give our expertise or our labor away for free a lot of time.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when you have those numbers and you have in your head and you have those goals set, then you can make an educated choice
Yes.
and then run it through that filter of how does this choice affect what my life experience will be.
Yes.
And I may choose. There's people all throughout history that have chosen a vow of poverty and don't have
Absolutely.
possessions, and
Hmm.
they get to choose that. They still have a minimal viable budget to survive or an organization
Right.
that's providing for them, right?
Right.
But that's their choice, and no judgment on that. But running that through the filter, and if we don't know what our numbers are,
Hmm.
then we can get away with it for a little bit.
Right.
And what's our future? That last question about our goals and our plans for the future.
So important. So I want to break it down for a couple of different things that I think about. Um, because there's so many different conversations we could have, right?
Right.
But first, again, knowing what your numbers are, going, of course, like you said, going back through and literally writing that down. So when Corona shut down the restaurant, right, I told you guys I was a kitchen manager. I stepped down to be a server, and you know what happened to the serving industry when Corona started. And I decided not to go back and instead use my money, my unemployment money, to start a business. And I did that specifically because I knew history, and it's Black History Month. So let's really have this conversation, right? Because we don't always have it, which is also
Right?
historical. But I started a business with my unemployment money because I knew that historically, when the Black community is on more government assistance, they end up in a worse position. So now I've been told that the projection for 2025 is that we are being as a community in a worse position than we were before Corona. That's us repeating history because we don't know it. But when I saw myself in unemployment, which I had never been in before, right? I said, Shannon by herself lets money fall through her fingers. We got to be more financially literate. How do I get an asset, which is what we were talking about last night on Clubhouse? How do I get something that will help my money work for me? How do I be wiser with my money? If I say I want to make $100,000 this year, which is a goal I have written down,
Yeah.
then what is realistic, right? What is my monthly expenses? I know what it is compared to what it was before Corona because I've been paying attention. And then what do I need to do to get there? If you ladies follow me on Instagram, you know that I've been talking about all the different streams of income that I've been working on. And I'll be honest with you, Christine, when I wrote down my financial goals this week and I was adding it up and then I multiplied it by the rest of the weeks that we have in the year, it wasn't even $30,000. So now I know I don't need to change my goals. I need to change what I'm doing so that I can reach my goal. But if I didn't do that, I would have been door dashing around the town trying to, you know what I mean? Trying to
Right?
make it to $100,000 when really I might need to go be a wholesaler, or I might need to be an author or do something else, make a digital product so that I can supplement it and then get there and then whatever it looks like, again, based on the weather of the situation that you're in. But had I not known my goal and then set goals for myself weekly, known what my expenses were, I would have just had a nice goal for 2021 because it's a new year and Corona can't hold me back, and
Right.
been sadly disappointed at the end of the year. But that would have been because I didn't set myself up.
Right. Such important info. I want to give a shout out to our friend Kamara who's listening while we're live today. And
Hello, beautiful.
ladies. Always lovely to have our friend Kamara in the house.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. And Um, something else I wanted to hit on too, Christine, is of course, again, we're women connected in wisdom. So we have to point it back to the women, right? House labor and caretaking is the most underpaid industry after slavery, right? So when you're taking care of all these, when I'm timing myself and I realize that I'm prepping and cooking for 3 hours a day because we're mincing garlic and onions and bell peppers and kale, and that adds up to 3 hours that I could have been door dashing or I could have been working on social media, you know?
it's been years, but there was a study done years ago, and it was like if you added up all the things that most women do,
Yeah.
uh, and especially if they have children in their homes,
Right.
it's a six-figure job if they were
Six
paid what
figures.
men are done to do outside of the home, right?
Exactly.
And it makes it more. And this was before Uber and before, but when you add in like chef and
Yes.
housekeeper and
Yes.
Uber driver and like um, tutor,
Yes.
all the things that add,
Therapists.
right?
Yeah.
All
Mm-hmm.
the things that add up. Laundry, like, if
Yes.
you pay somebody to do your laundry, all of that, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah, it's amazing. And you were talking about earlier before we jumped on, you were talking about the book you're reading, um, the one about the hours of the week,
The
160 hours of the week.
Right. So again, Rich Dad Robert Kiyosaki, it's all about time freedom and financial freedom, right? And so for me, these two things have been hand in hand. A lot of times it points to even the class earlier, right? How entrepreneurs do X, Y, and Z. And right now there's this divide of this is information for entrepreneurs and this is information for everybody else. But really, entrepreneurs are just in a situation where they know they're responsible for managing everything. Employees are used to their boss telling them what they're going to make, what their schedule is, and then we base the time with the kids, or me getting my nails done off of whatever off day I have that week. And hopefully I have 2 off days. Hopefully I'm not working 9 days in a row or whatever is mandated by this company. So it's really important that we just manage it better as individuals, whether we work for somebody else or not. But again, that's not how we're taught to do things, and that's why we're here on this podcast talking about it today.
Right? So we had talked about resources for finances.
Yes,
You and I had talked about this. Like, how do we do this with all these busy things we're doing? And how do we, because it can be overwhelming, right? If you weren't
absolutely.
about there's a lot of shame and guilt around finances.
Hmm.
When I was a baby social worker, I was doing home studies, getting folks ready to be foster adoptive parents. And I would do home studies, and this was basically a 6 to 10 page document of
Mm,
everything in their life, right? And we ask really intimate questions.
yeah.
And I will tell you, truth, people found it easier to talk about their sex lives than they did about their finances.
Hmm.
Like there is a lot of charge around finances. And so I'm always looking for resources. And I also think in most of the studies I've read and most of the books, they say finances are one of the most stressful things for couples. It's one of the most things they argue about, right?
Mm,
So I'm always looking for resources about finances. And I know you are the queen of resources and
yes,
books. So tell
yes.
people about the book you were referencing.
Yes, the 168 hours. And thank you for coming back to that, because I was definitely still on it too. It's about managing your time. And we all have 168 hours in a week. And when I heard that it was more than, I didn't know off the top of my head how many hours are in a week, but I knew that I had been working on my schedule. And as a manager, that was one of the most difficult things for me to do. And it was like that across the board for managers. So if you don't have managerial experience and you've been struggling with your time, one, I would say be graceful with yourself and understand that it's a difficult task, anyways. And then when you want to start working on it, start with 168 hours a week and then reverse engineer it, which is start at the end and go backwards, right? So how many hours do you want to sleep at night? Some people sleep 8, some people sleep 6 because of their work schedule. And figure out whatever you want to do based on your roles and responsibilities that you have, and then map out your time. Make sure you give time to rest, because if you don't rest, you're just burning yourself in the ground and not being as effective as you could be. And then after that, you can set out your goals, and what you should be working on based on the time that you've allotted to it, and you can go from there. But 168 hours has been a great audiobook to be able to give me more context to how to frame my schedule as an entrepreneur.
I love that, which
Yeah.
ties right in with the financial question.
Oh, of course.
Let's talk a little bit, Shannon, about the 8 best personal finance apps of 2021, which was a
Yes,
research we found getting prepped for this show. And this was an article done by Latoya Irby in The Balance. And you and I both have this app on our phone. I will
yes.
be really honest and say I've not done a good job of using it. But the number one best overall financial app is Mint.
I love Mint.
MINT. Yeah.
Yes. And Mint is actually one of my favorite apps right now. And not because I use it as often as I should, if I'm honest as well, but because it sends you notifications, right? And it's like, Shannon, did you really spend $0 last week? And let me tell you, ladies, as somebody who went into Target to get a pair of shoes, I came out and had spent $600, did not get any shoes. Okay. So went from that to, Shannon, did you really spend $0? Yes, Mint. I really did not spend any money. Okay. Yes. And it
Were
helps.
you no by November or
It was crazy. I said, this is a problem. I've got to get disciplined. I've got to know where my money goes, because I work too hard to not know.
yeah. So it
Yeah,
tells you and it will connect. I know it's an app that intersects with your bank account. It can intersect
absolutely.
with your PayPal. It can so I know a little bit about it. I'm going to commit to using it more and better.
Okay.
Um, because I had another friend tell me it takes a little bit to set up, especially the budget piece. But once you get it set up, it works brilliantly, and it's free, y'all. It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
So that is meant. We'll put that in the show notes, and let us know, like by tagging us on Wisdom in Action, if you download it. You hashtag Wisdom in Action and download it. If you download it and start using it, let us know,
That would
because
be
that'll
awesome.
that'll
Yeah.
motivate. So the second one they said was one that I had never heard of, and it's YNAB. You need a budget.
I love that. And I tried to get around it. I thought that I didn't. Oh, I know about how much I know. You need a budget.
Well, and the reason is it's best for debt payoff, right?
Hmm.
It's best for, so I want to read this because this was what their description was, and I think it fits right in with what we're talking about.
Okay.
It's built around the 4 rules, right? Give every dollar a job.
Hmm.
Embrace your true expenses, which we've already talked about that a little bit, like being really honest about it. Because, man,
Yeah.
when you start really looking, you're like, I did what? Like you said about
Right.
the market thing, right?
Hmm.
What?
Yes. I knew
Um,
at the register. Like, what?
and then roll with the punches and age your money. So I think you referenced the roll with the punches when, like, the weather or the
Yeah.
pandemic or
Yeah.
there are going to be times that unexpected things happen.
Right.
And so if we can prep a little bit for them,
Hmm.
and then the age your money is definitely about, investing and learning that, which I know we have feelers out for some really good guests in the future coming on
Yeah.
about stock market investing and how to do that for retirement. And
Yes. And
yeah,
And it's interesting because a lot of people talk about retirement, but whether it's for retirement and you want to invest for the long term, or if it's for income and you're trading, you're day trading or you're night trading and doing different things. So, the last biggest point that I want to make for this episode, Christine, we talked about the women's side of it, right? But of
right.
course, we got to talk about the black side of it too, because it sounds really simple, the definition, right? Financial wellness, oh, just write it down, set some goals, and you'll be good. But we have to think about where we've been and how we're psychologically conditioned, right? And when you talk about a goal, let's say my goal, right? And if I would have been 100 years in the past or 150 years in the past, me having this much potential and setting goals would have got me killed. You see what I mean? So when you talk about long-term planning, I just now have started to be able to think about and really give some context to where I can realistically see myself in 5 years. 10, 20 years is still too far. I'm not there yet. Um, but when you talk about working hard and then the sheriff and the police department kicking in your doors and taking your assets, if you need assets versus liabilities, when you're in a system that's setting you up to only have liabilities, and then you are intentionally underdeveloped so that we don't know what these different things are or how to navigate the rules, because all it is a system. Thankfully, money plays by the rules. So if I know how to study and work in the school system, I can learn this and figure it out. But all of that conditioning and being a woman on top of that, so being underpaid, and when you talk about working in the house, people and women being used to being paid nothing. If you see a woman working, you expect to pay her nothing. It's even a further distance to have to travel, to get to being able to wrap your mind around budgets, long term goals, being self disciplined, and knowing how to get from A to S, you know?
Yeah, I think it's so true. Like, I mean, it goes back to the inequality from 400 years that
Yeah.
our country was built on slavery,
Yeah.
right? And free and enforced labor.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a class this last week with some incredible Black scholars, and
Mm.
they were talking about reparations, and this was I had no idea. For the last 4 decades, there has been House Bill 40 that has never made it as far as a vote.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what blew me away, Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
Just do a commission on the study of reparations. Not
Mm-hmm.
talking about how are we, like, just to get a study
Mm-hmm.
on reparations.
Mm-hmm.
Never made it out of committee. It has a chance right now.
Yeah.
Bill 40 does. We all need to reach out to our legislators because, y'all, this is just information.
Right.
Let's do a commission and a study on it. Like, but
Mm-hmm.
that really shows the inequality and the racism in our country that we can't even get a study. Like, it's, it, it's mind blowing. And I don't have to tell you because you're living it, right? It's,
Right.
yeah. And
Yeah.
access to resources, and yeah, it's amazing. It is.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. I've been thinking about because I told you I've been reading the lynching in America, right? And that, I mean, I read it, the history of everything and how things were ran basically. And when I was listening to the Senate case this week with Trump, it was really interesting. And his lawyer is amazing, as I'm sure he should be for however much he's paying him, right? But this is the point that I would like to put on the table that I think they missed. And I also feel like I understand why they couldn't bring it up because we're in the Senate, right?
Mhm.
Um, is that Trump said be peaceful and patriotic. And so his lawyer was like, he said peaceful and patriotic. How else is that a direct command to go doing, what they did on January 6th? And I said, well, wait a minute, because patriotism used to mean something else. How are you telling me that these 4,084 lynchings, that a lot of them were ripped, these people were taken from the jails, where are the guards? Oh wait, they're with the other people, right? That makes sense, so if you say peaceful and patriotic, to me, Shannon Mitchell in 2020, just reading this book for Black History Month, I'm reminded that those two things have been contradictory, and so we definitely have to be intentional about our wellness.
And we have to have these discussions, right?
Right.
We have to have the discussions. I mean, we know as women, there's still a disparity in pay
Right.
for the and I'm horrible at quotes. Statistics. I should have looked this up before I came on. It
Mm-hmm.
used to be 40 cents difference in
Mm.
for every dollar women made 40 cents less, but that was
Then
not
men.
white women. That was white women made less.
Right.
And black women and other women of color made even
Right.
less than that, right?
Exactly. Right.
So even that equal pay for equal work, uh,
Mm-hmm.
is part of this discussion in finances. Uh,
Right.
and then you add in the fact that most of the time it's women who are the caregivers and have children. And boy, it's just a cycle that we got to break ourselves out of, because the reality is nobody else is going to help
We're
us with it.
not. Yeah.
Because
I can't. Yeah.
there's a reason that they're keeping women in these
Mm,
positions, right?
right.
I
Right.
grew up in Texas, so they always said barefoot and pregnant, right? But
Mm,
there was a thing about that, right?
okay.
Have you ever heard that phrase?
No, I haven't.
Barefoot and pregnant is because you don't have shoes, so you can't
Mm,
leave. And if you're
mm,
pregnant, you're tied to the house, right?
wow.
It's that
Mm,
same concept of keeping women tied to where you want them. So,
right. Oh, and I know we're wrapping this up, but that is, I will say, the last point that I want to make, because I've been again in Clubhouse and listening to different people's viewpoints in these rooms on um, what what men want and why they haven't been, why women haven't been engaged to all these things. Again, it's really interesting now being in a new space where women are less financially dependent, and if we're financially well, we definitely have an opportunity to do that, but because of the financial disparity and that how that ties to you surviving and your children surviving and the way that everything, all the other dimensions of wellness play out, it makes sense why the conversation has been leaned a certain way, so um, we talked about the wisdom in action, right? And you guys, you ladies downloading Mint, we're going to put in the show notes the article that Latoya wrote about the 8 best apps for your finances so that we can start paying attention to it. I know that it's a lot, especially with Corona. It makes it even more difficult, but honestly, it makes it even more important. And I want to give a shout out to ShealoGlo. That is really what the company is about. Taking a second in the middle of the chaos and all 8 different dimensions of wellness that you're trying to balance every day and flow with the situation that you're in, right? Christine has hers. Take a second to take care of yourself, because a lot of times they will not. It could be your husband, it could be your dad, it could be your daughter, and you thought she was going to do something or whatever it is. You are responsible for your wellness, and you also have what you need. We have resources available for you. We're all connected in wisdom. That's why we're here. And we can definitely start setting goals. And if you set a goal and you need to change it, you realize that's not exactly where you need to be. There's time and space to fix it. So that's what gives me hope during Corona, and even the financial upheaval that I've had personally in my life. There's things that you can do to put yourself in a better position.
And I want to give a shout out for community care here about mutual aid. Like we talk about that a lot with social justice, and I know we're wrapping, so it could be a whole nother show on mutual
Yeah.
aid. But you know, sometimes, well, I think it does tie in with what we talked about earlier, Shannon. Like we have to know our numbers and know what we need to ask
Yes.
for what we need. Whether that's
Yes.
asking from the universe and God, whether that's asking for a friend, whether that's asking from an employer, because we need to know what we need to make, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
or asking it of ourselves for how many hours do we have to give. I
Yes.
think that going back to that, knowing our numbers and writing them down. And when your resources get low, I don't know if you can see this.
I can see it. You need some
My
more.
ShealoGlo, order some more, refill your
Yes.
bucket, do what you need to take care of yourself, because
Yes.
I think it's important. So,
Yes. And like you said, well, like the banner said, wellness is a verb, ladies. So tag us on what you're working on this week. We'll see you on social media. Don't forget to be well, be wise, and be whole. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5.